we have no real media in this state. Well, you have us.
It's really time for a parent revolution.
Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
That's what the left did with COVID in so many different ways.
Wind energy, especially offshore wind, is a big loser and just another government boondoggle.
Like, what's going on?
People are fed up. They lied to us then. They're lying to us now. They're assaulting our families.
What we do is we look at the lies of the left that they keep pushing out, that America doesn't work for black people. That is not true.
They want to now monopolize truth and say, truth is only what we say truth is. Damn the data, damn the science.
The key with science is it always needs to serve objective thinking. They just call anyone who challenges them a science deniers.
They're evil.
Shut up or we'll cancel you.
What we're going through is a cultural revolution.
This is big, and this is how change begins.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Ocean State Current Command Bunker. Now playing from in the dugout, number 37, Mike Stenhouse.
In America, as we approach our 250th birthday, and in Rhode Island, are we squandering 250 years of investment in liberty and trying to replace America's noble and great history with something much more evil, if not false? We're going to discuss that today with an author, my guest, Michael Bedenbaugh, who we'll bring on to you in just a second. Hey, folks, welcome to In the Dugout. Your host, Mike Stenhouse here. Michael Bedenbaugh is an author. He's a former naval veteran, and he's got a new project in mind to try to restore some of the principles of our country as we prepare to celebrate our 250th. So without any further ado, let's bring on my special guest today, Michael Bedenbaugh. Michael, welcome to In the Dugout.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Now, I see you're wearing a cap. What does that say?
Well, you said a cap was to show off for the team, and I'm afraid growing up here in South Carolina, I never had a major league baseball team that we followed that much. So I said, well, the team I follow every morning is my Waffle House team that feeds me great breakfast every morning. And I said, I need a hat, and they handed me my Waffle House hat.
It doesn't have to be a baseball team. It could be a corporate hat. It could be a restaurant. It could be Clemson. I know, one of your favorite universities as well. But Waffle House, such great memories for me. When I played minor league ball in the South, even out West, I think, probably in Kansas, I even think, we lived on Waffle Houses. They gave us back in the day like $8 or $10 a day to eat 3 meals. So the only place you could really stuff get full as an athlete, at least for pregame meal, was Waffle House. I love Waffle Houses. I don't think we have them up here.
Well, we got tons of them here, but I've got this one I go to at exit 82 in Prosperity off of I-26, and these girls are so good, and they just help set my day right. It's like Cheers there. I go in, and they all speak. They know exactly what I want on each day, and it's just nice to have that, and they're all from the community. And, you really can see America when you go on a Waffle House.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Especially at 2 in the morning. I used to manage bands. And after the band would do the gig, we'd go to a Waffle House at 2 in the morning. And you saw America there.
Well, we did Waffle House at between 11 and 2 in the afternoon. But at 2 in the morning, it was White Castle for us. That's what we did.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we didn't have those.
Well,
I've worn my hat. I've worn my hat. I'm going to take that off now.
All right, fine.
There you
Thanks for playing ball with us. All right, Michael,
Sure.
You are the creator of something called Project 26. You have a book, which we'll talk about in a bit, Reviving Our Republic, which I assume can be found on Amazon. But as I mentioned, you're concerned that we're squandering 250 years of investment in liberty and that we're focusing on other stuff. What is your premise?
Well, so I really did this, when I wrote my book, Reviving Our Republic, 95 Theses for the Future of America. I did that in coordination with when I ran for Congress as an independent down here in the 3rd District in South Carolina. And as I did that, I've been pushing the concept of what I have in the book. And then all of a sudden I see Project 2025 came along.
Oh, that's the one from Heritage?
That's the one from Heritage. Now, I have some good friends at the Heritage Foundation.
So do I.
And I understand. However, I had serious concerns with the direction they're taking this, because the presumption they have in here, they have the same presumptions of the problems in the country, but their solution is giving more power to the executive in order to fix it. And that's a very serious problem for me. And they spend this much time thinking of it when I'm like, you know what? My little book only takes this much time to think of it. And it's, a fraction of the cost. But it's to look at the fact that the corruptive things that have created our problems are really systematic issues on how we represent ourselves, how we make decisions in Washington versus our states, and all of those corrupted influences, along with the growth of mega global corporations that have become like state actors. But instead of remedying those, Project 2025 wants to empower those to fix it, and I think that's the wrong approach.
All right, so we're gonna unpack a lot about that as we go through our discussion. But I assume, based on what you just said, that you're a big believer in federalism as opposed to a powerful centralized federal government. I mean, after all, our Constitution was supposed to set the framework for limited federal government.
That's right. And we need to empower the concept of federalism. And here in South Carolina, that can get into trouble when you're talking with folks, because then the ballywick of people saying states' rights, which didn't have a good reputation considering what happened in South Carolina during Jim Crow. But I call it states' responsibility. States have responsibilities that we need to empower, and we can never empower as long as we have a federal government creating an income tax system to take all our wealth to Washington that then we have to beg back for. And
I agree. And I'm going to make a little parallel here. I just thought of it because we've always promoted federalism here in our think tank. We don't want to see a sense. But in the same way that with free speech, people should be free to say things that offend you, piss you off, you disagree with, as long as it doesn't lead to violence or something like that, or a threat. But in the same way, states are going to make mistakes. They might even make mistakes that harm their own people. But the federal government also has to respect the 10th Amendment and the concept of federalism. That, hey, that's just the design of our country. Agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. This experiment that they started creating in the Constitutional Convention, is a messy one. It requires people and citizens to be involved in what happens. And what I've seen happen, at least during my lifetime, I'm 64, and during my lifetime, I've seen people give up their citizenship and the responsibilities of their citizenship to be engaged positively with how the government works, and just think, as long as I vote for person, I don't have to think about it anymore. And that's what's happened. We've lost a sense of responsibility to our own government, and that's why we have what we have today.
All right, we'll talk later on about what citizens can do. We're also going to talk later on, once we dig into some more of your theses, if you would, and your project 2026. We're also going to talk, just to let our Rhode Island viewers know, that we're also going to talk about your views on Rhode Island's bogus social studies standards that I think plays right into what you said, that it's basically destroying the concept and trying to tarnish the foundational principles of this country by painting a false narrative. And I agree with you that in this upcoming year, 2026, when we celebrate our nation's 250th, every American should at least be aware of what those foundational principles are, and hopefully reappreciate them.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was a remarkable thing, a miracle that happened in Philadelphia, in world history of human civilization, that people could come together and create a new government the way they did. It had its quirks and foibles, and that's part of human nature. But it's something that we need to start learning how to uplift in our education system to show we can be engaged and be part of this system that gave us the liberty to be the best we can be.
And I'll explore this later. Again, I just want to stay on this one more second. It's an important
Yes.
point I want to make up front. But you talk about we're at risk of losing 250 years of investment in liberty, and that is the birthright of our nation, liberty. The left wants you to believe that the birthright of America is one of oppression. And that's what's inherent in those social studies standards by our own Rhode Island Department of Education that we'll talk about later. But just more generally, I'm sure you agree that America's birthright is one of liberty and not one of oppression.
It is of liberty, and we could talk more about that. I mean, being in the South, where I grew up in a rural area,
Right.
I did see the oppression of the sharecroppers who lived on our farm. So I have my foot in both things. But it's not about what is the primary force. It's about how these people were then brought out through awareness and understanding into being equal parts of our society. And the fact we have a system that can do that is what has to be underlined to show we can grow out of the sins of the past.
Absolutely. Hey, there's no doubt that oppression, slavery, all that other stuff existed, but that was not. But to continue that oppression was not the purpose of the founding of America. In fact, as you kind of alluded to, the language of freedom and equal rights and God-given rights, in our Constitution, in our Declaration of Independence, pretty much guaranteed that freedom would come to those people who had been oppressed and to some degree still are today. All right.
Yep.
So a little bit on your background.
Yes.
First, I know you've got a Navy background. Just give us a little bit of how you got to this point right now.
Well, I grew up on a farm here in South Carolina from a family that I cherish my childhood here. I live in a place where my Revolutionary War ancestor only lived 2 miles away from where I live now, and all of my descendants were there between here and there. So I grew up with a very powerful sense of place. I think place is very important. And so from there, I went to college, and as most 18-year-old boys in the 1970s, I was not ready for it. I dropped out and I joined the Navy. When the Navy was a parachute for me that saved me, that taught me discipline, that taught me what I could be in my life. And, I was in high school making C's and the class clown in the back of the class. After 5 years in the Navy, I went back to college, and I was cum laude. I mean, I was on the honor roll, and it taught me how to have discipline, to understand my sense of citizenship. I took international studies.
Was that Clemson?
What's that?
Was that Clemson?
No, it wasn't Clemson, because where I live, the best international studies program was Carolina. So, the enemy for me growing up, my uncle was on the board of trustees of Clemson when I went to Carolina, and he did not like that. And I'm like, sorry, I want to live at home and drive to Columbia. So,
when you say Carolina, that's University of South Carolina?
Thank you. Yes, University of South Carolina.
We up here in the North don't know your language down there. So.
Yes. Well, I have to always think of that because North Carolina does the same thing.
Right, exactly, right.
And USC is sometimes Trojans.
Right,
No,
right,
it's
right.
South Carolina. And then I started a company with my first wife. We did promotions all over the world with music and film companies. And then after our divorce, I then went and ran the statewide preservation organization for South Carolina. And again, with the sense of empowering place, empowering communities of their history. That's really important. We need to know where we're from, who we are, what was here, and to see history be replaced by buildings being torn down that are important.
Monuments,
really important. Monuments,
yep.
Everything. And so I was on Prosperity City Council when I lived in Prosperity. And I've always seen my duty as a citizen to be involved with that. And most recently, I retired from Preservation, South Carolina. I started this podcast, started a book. I ran for Congress and doing real estate. So there you go. That's how I got here.
So there really is a place called Prosperity. It's not just a mythical, fictional name, huh?
No, and it's a fascinating little town because it was originally called Frog Level because it was a swampy area where the first store was. And in 1855, they got the railroad, and to get the railroad to come through, they realized they needed to change the name. So in 1876, they named it Prosperity after the ARP Church, which is Associated Reformed Presbyterian. I don't know if y'all have those up there, but they were the church of the Scotch-Irish settlers. They were very Calvinistic, very conservative folks. And there are also other prosperity churches around. West Virginia has one, Pennsylvania has one. So it was a cultural thing. They named prosperity, which kind of had to do with the spiritual belief that, you know, God will grant you prosperity if you lived a good life. And so that's what they named it. So that's what the town was named in 1876.
Organization, the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity.
That's right.
They didn't, right? No.
What's that? No,
they didn't name it after our center, right? Freedom and Prosperity.
No.
All right. Hey, and one thing I'm sure you're too humble to say, but tell us about this award you received called the Order of the Palmetto. Of course, the Palmetto tree is the big tree. The Palmetto Institute is one of our sister think tanks in South Carolina. You received the Order of the Palmetto for your contributions to the state of South Carolina. What was that? That's pretty cool.
Well, I was very blessed to have very good friends when I announced my retirement from Preservation, South Carolina. I'm very proud of a lot of work me, along with my board, did in saving a lot of buildings that would not have been lost, that would have been lost without our actions. And one of my board members was gracious enough to get a campaign, and Henry McMaster, our governor, blessed me with Order of the Palmetto. So I'm always thankful for that. That was a wonderful day when that happened.
Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
That's and I assume those are Historical Preservation Society type buildings that you saved.
Yeah, well, it was good work, and now I'm able to do it with real estate, focusing on historic houses that trying to get a new home for. So still doing it.
All right, your biography says that one of your primary premises is that you advocate for policies that strengthen local communities and honor Americans' heritage. We talked a little bit about Americans' heritage. You had indicated earlier that citizens need to step up and take some responsibility to honor that heritage on their own. So when you say policies that strengthen local communities, what do you mean?
Well, let's take my book has 95 theses with a lot of different ideas, but let's get a 36,000 foot view of it. Basically, what has happened in the country in the past 80 years has been an extraction of resources and responsibility on states and communities that goes to the federal government through issues of, federal income tax and how to get grants. And, people are on the local communities, in order to get anything done now, required to have to get grants from the federal government to help them get something done. When I ran for Congress, I got so frustrated at every mayor I met with. The first thing they ask is, what are you bringing back?
Right, the bacon.
The bacon, and
the pork. Yeah,
that's it. And I lost a lot of votes because I'm like, I'm going up there to change that. I'd rather, you have to have resources to invest in your community, and the resources come from taxes. But I'd rather us have more of the tax burden on local and community than what we give to the federal government and then have to beg for it back. In South Carolina, half the roads that are built here are built through federal subsidies, which means federal regulatory issues and all of that. And, the whole thing under Biden, the Build Back Better, I could show you bridges that were built over places that didn't need bridges just because they had the money to do it. And then contractors made tons of money off of getting federal money to build these bridges that weren't necessary. So, we need to turn that back upside down. It'll take a long time to do it. None of these things can happen overnight. But we need to start having the discussion that money in these communities need to stay here to focus on stuff here, and in states to focus on stuff that are states' responsibility.
No, we agree. I mean, it's kind of a obviously silly and inefficient system to taxpayers in a state to send the money to the federal government only for the federal government to send back some portion of that back to the states. Why not just keep it here in the first place? And it also goes along with the federal government, because we're a laboratory of 50 states, I mean, there is no one size fits all grant program or any kind of program that works well in every state. So it's kind of a silly proposition, but it is what gives the federal government so much power. And you're right, local officials, state officials, have become almost 100%, an umbilical cord, if you would, to the federal government's cash cow money. It's really not the way our republic was designed.
No, it wasn't. And now our House of, members of the House of Representatives, they're basically salesmen to bring resources back.
Right.
So, and they get power out of doing that.
Right.
Every time Lindsey Graham shows up at a golden shovel event that he got federal funding for, he really doesn't have an incentive to stop that system from happening because it gives them more power. Keep me. That's how Strom Thurmond in our state was elected for so long, and all these others, because the longer they're there, the more they can influence the budgeting process and bring more money back. And that's another part of this lifetime achievement they have in being representatives instead of what they're supposed to be. Live here in the community, work, make a living, give yourself years to go up and represent your community, then come back and pick back up the plow and go back to work again. That's how it's supposed to work, and I want to try to bring that concept back into the conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about term limits in a minute, but I just want to do a quick aside. My son played baseball at the University of Rhode Island, and they had a game at University of South Carolina. This was probably 15 years ago, maybe more. I don't know. But we went there, my wife and I. We went to and not only to the university and walked around there, but then we went to the state capitol in Columbia. And I'll never forget the big statue, maybe 100 yards or so from the State House there, from the Capitol building, of Strom Thurmond, right there on the State House grounds. So I mentioned that. Yeah, big statue of him there. Beautiful State House, yeah.
We're really proud of our State House, and we also still have stars mounted on the side of the State House. Well, probably some Union soldiers from Rhode Island actually shot cannons at it. So we have a history of that place has a lot of amazing history to it. And also, an aside, the largest single granite columns in the world are on our State House. Mine within a mile of where the State House is, out of the granite quarries on the river.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And we have our State House used to have anyway, one of the top 2 or 3 largest unsupported domes, domes in the world as well. So probably had a few columns supporting it. Let's go back to Revolutionary history, because you sound like you're pretty good on history, but you're probably aware of General Nathaniel Greene.
Yes.
A Rhode Island guy, one of Washington's top generals. He was in charge of the Southern campaign during the Revolutionary War for a long period, and probably had some excursions down in South Carolina. He's buried in Savannah, where he ended up, he got sick and died down there. But do you have any knowledge of Nathaniel Greene?
Well, Nathaniel Greene saved the revolution down here. We in South Carolina consider the revolution was won in South Carolina because in upcountry South Carolina, we had a civil war up here. And in fact, some of my ancestors were loyalists also. But Nathaniel Greene was replaced a general by the name of Gates, who was Horatio Gates, which was a big...
Good name.
Well, it is, but he was a big blowhard coward.
Yeah, I know.
And he lost the Battle of Camden, and Washington replaced him with Greene, and Greene immediately took advantage of guerrilla warfare with 3 of our colonels here, and he helped organize that in a way that we were able to kick the British out of the upcountry. Because I tell you, a good half of the upcountry of South Carolina were loyalists. And we thought it was over, because where the revolution was fought so much up in the north with Washington, in 1775, the loyalist threat was pretty much put down. And until Charleston was taken in 1780, we had nothing going on for almost 6 years in this state while the revolution was fought everywhere else. And then it all broke loose here to bedlam. And for almost a year, it was we were getting ready to celebrate all what happened up here in all the battles. We had more battles. We had more citizens killed here in backcountry of South Carolina than any other state. So
Wow.
it's a fascinating history and of a lot of guerrilla warfare and a lot of innocent people dying here.
Of course, Charleston, as you mentioned, would become later famous for firing the first shots of the Civil War. What would
Oh
lead to
yeah,
that?
yeah.
So,
You can't. I always tell folks you can't understand America without understanding the history of South Carolina.
wow.
We tend to stir the pot down here a little bit.
Well, well, it's attractive to us Yankees up here because there's so many of our friends who live in Charleston now have gone down to your state. All right, let's get back to your premise, your book. Um, you have also, so you have Reviving Our Republic. You have let's bring up this website. You have the initiative called Project 2026. You've got the 95 Theses. You've got something. What was the caucus you called? You got something called
I call it the Fulcrum Caucus.
the Fulcrum Caucus. Explain all that. Put it all together for us.
So the basic issues of and the policies that I have in the book, basically I say, if Project 2025 says there's only one way to fix the country, then Project 2026 is a way that we can rediscover the foundational principles of separated government, balanced checks and balances, and power coming from communities and states up to Washington, D.C. And that's what all my 95 Theses deal with. And I utilize 95 Theses, just a little history with Martin Luther, who pushed back on a corrupted Catholic Church in the 16th century with nailing his 95 Theses on the door of a church. I took that growing up in a Lutheran area. I thought it was kind of cool, nerdy, historical thing to lay out 95 Theses of ourselves to go against a corrupted federal government that has lost its way on how our foundation has been weakened because of the different things that have happened over the past 100 years. And so the Project 2026 is really a way to try to attract new representatives to come into Washington that will then act as a fulcrum caucus to utilize the points in this book, because all it would take to control the House of Representatives is 10 to 15 people. They can keep a
fulcrum.
majority
That would upset the power or the balance of power.
Yes.
That's why you probably use the word fulcrum.
That's right.
Because it's about balance. The tipping point there.
The tipping point, and that was the point of that. Because then you can come to compromise. Good, you want that bill passed? Well, then that will only happen if you pass term limits.
All right, so let's look at some of the goals just quickly. You can comment. We don't have time to get into each one individually, but these are your goals of the Fulcrum Caucus. Term limits, I agree. I mean, it's just the longer you're in Congress, you can't help but become corrupt. I don't think even the best people become corrupted. It's just too much money, too much influence, too much pressure. They just wear you down. I like personhood versus corporatehood. You're right. Corporations. Look what's going on in our healthcare industry. Corporations are influencing people into bad medicine, bad healthcare.
It's terrible health care. And I mean the Citizens United really, I don't blame Citizens United decisions, because the Supreme Court, I think, ruled with the proper precedents. That doesn't mean it needs to happen. They were just being originalists, looking at the fact that personhood had been given to corporations for the past 100 years. We need to go in and separate out personhood from artificial personas, and that will take an amendment. But if we did that amendment, we would solve the issue of Citizens United and this corporate money going in.
Yeah, because and there's nothing in the Constitution that says corporations have God-given rights or anything close to that. But yet, we treat corporations as people.
Yeah.
In fact, we had a dispute with a local town here. It was Barrington, Rhode Island, and they had a town manager who basically said, "Wait a minute, we have well, this was not a corporation. This was we have government right to free speech, something like that. As apart from people. So we therefore can limit people's free speech, because government has a right to free speech too. And I'm all right. Wait a minute now, but you're saying this with regard to corporations. So what would that amendment look like? What would the key point of that amendment be
Well,
to clarify people versus corporations?
well, I'm not an attorney, but I
Okay.
just have done enough studies in it to know that we need to differentiate. There's no differentiation in the Constitution between artificial personas, because for a corporation to work and to have the protections and a trust, I don't know if you do, but I was fortunate enough, my father had set up a financial trust. You need to have a trust in order to protect wealth. But in order for legal ways for that to work in the law, it has to have personhood attached to it. This goes back to English common law stuff. And so what the Constitution didn't do, and now that we know corporations have grown in such power under those protections, we need just to separate and distinguish from the 14th Amendment. Because the 14th Amendment, it mentions persons. We need to distinguish natural persons versus artificial personas, which are corporations, and separate those out as not part of the citizenship of the nation. And that, I think, will go far on one piece to try to heal that problem.
Well, our declaration states clearly, and the Constitution purpose is to preserve individual rights,
Yes.
God-given, constitutionally granted rights. And if you look at the goals, and just occurred to me, if you look at your goals, your first four, all your goals, maybe even the last one as well, all of these have to do with the corrupting influence of big business.
Yeah.
We want term limits because big business will corrupt you. We want personhood clarified separate from corporations. You want to curb corporate monopolies. You want to rein in the military industrial complex. That means we don't want to feed money to the big defense contractors all the time. And fiscal responsibility, we spend money, a lot of money. Well, we spend a lot of it on a lot of social welfare programs, but also on a lot of corporate welfare. So really, boy, I mean, if you think about it, you're not, I'm putting words in your mouth. You agree or disagree, but it seems to me your number one enemy in all this is big business.
Well, they're not the enemy. They just have to be clarified
They're the
for
problem.
what their lane needs to be. And the
they're
fact
the problem.
that that's it. And the fact that we've developed a cult, at least in the past, with the neoconservative movement in the 60s, kind of got into the sense of, well, if anybody can grow a business, then if they got a big business, that's the American dream. And they've created that mythology around big business that, yes, we do need big business to launch rockets to Mars. We need big business that can create cars on an assembly line. But we don't need big business influencing the governance of how we run things.
Yeah, you said it best. Stay in your lane. They're important.
Stay in your lane.
We need them. You said it best. Stay in your lane. There's no such thing. There's no boundaries anymore. It seems.
It's not. And we need to think about that. Now, on the sense of the term limits, when the Constitution was written for the House of Representatives, each representative only represented 35,000 people. That was their constituents. That's the population of my county in this rural
county. It's like 20 times that big now, right?
750,000.
Yep.
And it's too big.
Yep.
And it's too much responsibility for one person to know.
We need more members in the House.
We need more members in the House.
Wow.
Now, what that number is and what systems to how they can govern with more members, that's something we have to work through. But I know it's too much, because when you got 750,000 constituents, the people you listen to are not the individuals who voted for you, but it's the donors and the most influential in those areas that are governing what you're voting for.
And from that larger footprint, it takes more campaign money, and therefore, whether it's corporations directly or through their employees, it basically more bribe money to influence people. All right, let's move on. So what I want to talk about, so you've conceived this idea. If we can just get 10 to 15 members, I believe, in the House, you say representatives,
or the Senate too. Yeah.
Okay. But you're saying they can make a difference. They can maybe upset the balance of power. How are you going to get this started? I mean, do you have any reason to believe that there's anybody in the House or Senate right now that's going to help you build this thing? How do you get something like this actually started so it has an impact?
By sharing the news of this with everybody I can and getting on wonderful podcasts like this going, we can do this.
Yeah, but you got to have one person who's going to take that first step, or one group of small people. Do you have those people identified? Because look, I'm going to play devil's advocate. I could easily say, look, sounds great, Michael, but it's all pie in the sky. It's never going to happen.
Well, yep, I agree with you. It's not going to happen if people don't believe it can. I have been in communication. I do have representatives that have my book in their hand. I don't want to call them out, but there are people in Washington. There are folks that you've seen on TV that are talking about this stuff. They have my book in their hand. So I am trying to get, if I can get some tent pole folks that have national influence to hold this book up, that's the start. That's what I'm trying to do. You know, I did this independently. I didn't have a publishing house. I created my own publishing company, and I wrote this thing myself, and I put it out myself. So I'm at a handicap with that because I don't have a huge corporation pushing it onto media. I'm doing it all and with the help of folks like you who are putting me on their podcast, which I sincerely appreciate. And I just know it matters. I'm getting great reviews. People that read it love it. And I have enough faith in my own intention that I think I will break through a wall. I don't know when it'll be, but I intend to commit my life to doing that because it's that important. I got a potential grandchild coming up soon. I want to have a world where they will recognize the country that I grew up in.
All right, so your subtitle is "A Citizen's Call for Restoring Our Nation's Principles." Mm-hmm. What can citizens do?
They can start paying attention. They can stop jobbing out their responsibility to sycophantic representatives who are there just to build power base for themselves and start realizing. Well, so here's an example. In South Carolina, we are one of only 7 states that all you have to do to go into the voting booth is hit R and don't have to even know who's on the ballot. That is a terrible thing because that
you still have the master lever. We got rid of it about 8 years ago here.
Well, and we need to get rid of it here because that was one of the primary reasons I didn't get as many as because then the parties turn into branding, right? And Rush Limbaugh used to scream, you know, liberals are symbolism over substance. Right. Well, I would scream back at the radio, that's anybody that's marketing something is symbolism over substance, and the Republican Party is just as bad.
You know, I can't think of the name of her or the other. There was a second think tank in our National Association from South Carolina. I can't think of her name, but I remember she told me, because I was talking about we're blue, Rhode Island, 85% Democrat and blah, it can't get anything done, corruption. She goes, hey, in South Carolina, we're just as equally red, and we have just as much corruption here as a red state than you have as a blue state. Because I forget how the adage goes, how's it go? Absolute power breeds absolute tyranny and corruption or something like that. How's that go?
Corrupts absolutely.
Yep. Right. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's true whether you're Republican, Democrat, whether you're blue, red, conservative, or liberal, right?
You're right. My local House member who represents my district in the state House of South Carolina was asked when he got into the Republican caucus, you must pledge these things and sign before you can be part of the caucus. And one of those is you can never speak badly or run against another Republican member or support against another Republican member that's in the House, even if you knew they committed a crime.
Yeah.
He refused to sign it. He was kicked out of the caucus. And so it's a machine down here in a way that needs to be broken. And
the machines are everywhere.
And that's why, right. And that's why I had to run as an independent. Every one of these things in this book, I have met with a lot of my Republican friends here. They agree with everything in the book. But Mike, you're not part of the club. We can't support you.
I hear you.
You know, and so my opponent, the Republican opponent in the last House race, she had $900,000 pour into her coffers from outside PACs to ensure that their person who did what they want to do was put into place. $900,000. So,
all right,
there you go.
Let's talk about our think tank in Rhode Island deals.
Yes.
Well, we're well aware of, and a lot of federal policies have implications for state governance and money flowing in. But take your model, your project, your book, your 95 theses, and how would you say those apply to state governance?
Well, it assumes independence of thought for state governments. Right now, our state legislature and our state government is more like a green room for the federal government. Who's going to run for senator? Who's going to be in the House of Representatives? Who can get more power with Big Daddy Boss Man at Washington, D.C.? And we need, and this is a cultural type of conversation we need to have, to where the state needs to be detached from that some and focus only on what is good for the state. So in regards to school boards, the school board should have the independence to determine what books they want to have in their school district, how the kids are going to be taught. We have a cloud of political correctness, and also a problem of the last 50 years of terrible civics education, that many people don't even know our own history and are only looking for symbolism, which is some of the things that you had in y'all's paper that you had regarding the Rhode Island.
All right, so let's go there. You opened the door. I was going to go there anyway. Let's go there right now. So remember, your principle, independent of any conversation or knowledge of us, you said we want to strengthen local communities. You just mentioned how school boards should understand and recognize that they should have the power to make their own decisions. Well, we put out, because as we've discussed, often a one-size-fits-all top-down approach is not right, once doesn't work for everybody, and can often become corrupt and politicized at its very core, just like what happened with our Rhode Island Department of Education. So as all our viewers know, about almost 2 years ago now, we've put out this Taken for a Ride study, 54-page study or so, that shows how Rhode Island's social studies standards, which are just now being implemented and pretty much forced upon every of our 36 school districts, Michael, are going to have to follow this critical race theory, false narrative about our nation's founding. You're all about restoring the original, appreciating the original principles of our country as we approach our 250th birthday as a nation. Can anything be more unpatriotic than teaching false and evil narratives about our own country's founding?
Well, no. I mean, but, and to go back to my perspective of South Carolina, I grew up. It takes citizens' involvement to say what is right and what is wrong. And it's going to be a hard discussion. And what is evil versus what is true? How do we get the truth up there? What type of truth do we focus on? That just takes a lot of engagement. You can't have a society of free people without a lot of arguments, debates to get to it. And we've given up on that. So in a nutshell, I agree, we need to have a standard that uplifts the nation. We also need to have a way to communicate, here's where the nation, here's where things happened that were problematic, and how we fixed it, how it was repaired. Because I saw that firsthand here in South Carolina with the legacy of Jim Crow. And a lot of these type of standards that a lot of states like Rhode Island are going for is because of the history of what happened in places like South Carolina and Jim Crow. But many of them are taking it too far to be, and they're more symbolic than they are real. And what you're doing there to have this discussion is so vital, because it just says, wait a minute, let's really dig into this and push on this politically to make sure we're educating our children the way we want them educated. That's really important.
So that brings up a larger question. So let's add this now dimension to your premise, your writings, your initiatives and projects and goals. Citizens can take action, as you've discussed, but they need to know what they're doing and why. How important is it that we build this sense of patriotism, true understanding, honest understanding of our nation's principles of liberty into our youth? I mean, is your action something immediate now? Or are you setting a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50-year course of action? Because then that would necessarily mean that how we educate our young people is that much more important.
I'd love for it to be immediate, but
Yeah,
I know it's going to take a lot of conversation, and some of these things are going to be generational. One of my theses actually calls for universal inscription into a state military homeland protection system like we used to have militia, a state ordained militia system. I think every 18-year-old should understand what it means to protect your home, whether it's with the discipline and with a military conscriptive services on in your home. Because 200 years ago, every citizen had to muster in the mustering grounds with the local militia. That was your job. Now, at the time, you had to.
That was just the culture back then.
That was just it was the way Homeland Security was done. Was the able-bodied at the time men were always assembled. You were automatically in it when you turned 18, and you were expected, if the Indians attacked, you would get together and defend the area. In South Carolina, we had the cloud of slave insurrection that was called for that. So that was part of that history, but now we need to look at it as just engagement. It's been nationalized as the National Guard, and the federal government has kind of taken over how the National Guard works, which I think has gone way too far. We still have a state guard in South Carolina, which is the heir to the old militia system. But I think we need to have universal conscription into this for a period of time so young people understand there's a responsibility to living in the home you're living in, and not just being able to consume whatever you want to, go and party and have fun as a kid. You also need to be part of the solutions to your community. And I think that's important.
Would I be correct in assuming that when you say defend yourself, your families, your communities, that it's not just defending them physically from violence or attack or something like that, but it's also defending those who would want to take away your rights?
Well,
even if that was government.
Well, the way the Constitution was created because of the fear of undisciplined armed bands overthrowing state governments, which is what happened with Shays' Rebellion and why the Constitution was formed. So
yeah, we had a Dorr Rebellion in Rhode Island. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The
Dorr
War, yeah.
Well, and every state had something. So that's why, in order to create a more perfect reunion, you had to have a regulatory system of how your militias operated. So a legal militia worked under the representative government of your state, and they were the only ones allowed. In the Second Amendment, it mentions the well-regulated militia.
Right.
That refers to the legal militia that is governed by your state government. And unfortunately, and this is something I deal with a lot of folks that are big Second Amendments, which I am as well. I've got my guns under my bed to protect us. But many people believe that the Second Amendment gives anybody the right to pick up arms and rebel against the government. And that is absolutely untrue. It was meant to be able to, through a representative system, through democratic representation, to then give rights to people to protect through a regulated system. And I think for us to remember that, we need to start doing it. Every able-bodied 18-year-old should be part of that for at least 2 years.
Interesting. All right. So my point being, I didn't make my point too clear.
Sorry.
No, my fault. Because I want to go back to your whole original premise of what we started with. I want to circle back, I'm going to see if I can do this without getting lost. Because I'm a guy who likes to connect the dots, and sometimes I put too many dots in there, I confuse myself.
You and me both.
But defending yourself physically, okay, we get that. Second Amendment, but also Second Amendment, defending against enemies, foreign and domestic, or whether it's Second Amendment or just a constitutional right. And that means defending our liberties, defending our freedoms from those who would want to threaten our constitutional republic form of government. We are a constitutional republic. We are not a pure democracy.
That's right.
And in order to defend our constitutional republic and the God-given and constitutionally granted freedoms, you have to understand and appreciate those freedoms, or else you won't be inspired to protect them. So that's what I'm trying to say. I'm circling back, that understanding the original intent of our nation's founding, the principles, the freedoms that we've been afforded, is the foundation of everything, pretty much.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
It is. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if there was a question or.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just comment on that.
Yeah.
Agree, disagree, whatever. Yeah.
Well, I do, but again, here's a perfect example. One of the things that happened back 20 years ago, we have something down here called the Savannah River Plant, and the federal government had taken upon itself to close all these areas for bearing nuclear waste. And the Savannah River Plant was a place where actual nuclear bombs are made and created. Strom Thurmond was involved with that, took over almost the whole county and made it an isolated area where this happened. Federal government decided they will take nuclear waste and bring it into South Carolina and store there. Now, there was a lot of people in South Carolina that was ready for the governor to call out the state guard and stand at the border and not let those things come in, because we didn't want South Carolina to have more nuclear waste here. That, I believe, is a legitimate use of the states, and this is where the Federalist Papers came in, of the states to protect their own responsibility from an overreaching federal government, right? So that's kind of an easy one to me, but that's a good example of what happened here.
And it kind of goes back to the line you said earlier that I highlighted a while ago, that we each have to stay in our lanes, but we have to understand our lanes.
That's right.
And so many people don't understand anymore, and just so it's a core foundational piece of education, understanding what this great experiment called America is all about, before we can fight to preserve it properly. And I think that's kind of what you're saying as we approach our 250th.
Well, absolutely. And we're doing that down here in South Carolina. We're having seminars about the 250th birthday of the nation. But it does boil down to schools, and the schools are not doing their job to teach history and civics. But a lot of that is because of the federal standards that are imposed on them, that you get more grant money and more testing, but you don't have to test for history and civics, which means they're not being focused on. And that has been a slippery slope for the past 30 years. And ever since that horrible No Child Left Behind thing, the federal government constantly tries to figure out how to get more tentacles into controlling local education.
Money with strings, right?
Money with strings.
With strings. Yep. Those strings are deadly to our republic. They really are.
They really are.
All right. He is Michael Bedenbaugh. His project is called Project 26. You can do that at project-26.net. His book you can see here is Reviving Our Republic. You can find it on Amazon. Look, we need. You're right. You're right. Everything you say, this is what we need. How to get it done, I'm not sure. I wish you luck. If you get your Fulcrum Caucus started, you be sure to let me know, and we'll get you back on, and we'll see if we can give you a little extra momentum on that.
We'll stay in touch and look forward to things develop. Mike, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
And the historical area I'm going to visit off the South Carolina island is called what again?
Is Defusky Island.
Defusky Island. All right, everybody. Apparently, you can only get there by boat. I can't wait. It's on my bucket list now. Thank you, Michael Bedenbaugh. God bless you down there in South Carolina.
Thank you, Mike. Take care up there in Rhode Island.
All right, thank you. And God bless to you, our viewers, for tuning in today on this In the Dugout episode. So until next game, Mike Stenhouse out. We'll see you then.